putting panels on their roofs, not making stuff.
Yes.
So we can have our regular.
Like my house, I have 455 watt panels on my roof, probably doing the whole house.
Okay.
Probably 2 battery grids, so I need 3 extra. I
Yes.
need one just.
So I think we were looking at the second half. Oh, was it?
I think we already have.
Boys are just as bad. I'm like,
It's the video games and stuff.
Yeah, he doesn't use the camera, but he'll have a video game, you're right.
Okay. So keep the 4.
Bill.
Remove the 30. Yep, got it.
I know, like,
And then there's,
like my house, my wife likes to have coffee in the morning. Oh. Meter and plug in, it'll tell you how much money. I want to plug it into everything, and every time they use it, then it'll tell them how much money it costs.
I mean, we could send
Run it.
some of us to, some of us can go to that, and some of us can say.
Yeah, I have one of those that tells you amps and watts and all that stuff. Yeah, yeah, I haven't fully used it yet, but so like I said, coffee pot with a kettle on the stove. You turn that coffee pot on, that cold tap water turns hot within 30 seconds. That's 14 minutes. Juice just runs a lot of power right there. Same with the toaster, because those coils turn orange instantly.
Here's the thing, it's like double this. So this is February 10th. Oh, okay. So we're going to cancel the special meeting that we talked about.
Okay, it's 5:01. Shall we call to order? Okay, I think the confirmation of attendance has gone around. Various vouchers have been going around, so keep your email, check your emails, make sure you're signing your voucher so everyone gets paid. Is there any public comment? Okay. Approval of minutes, is there a motion for approval of minutes of 16 December 2024?
so moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, reports and updates, that will bring the superintendent.
So to get started, Happy New Year, everyone. I wanted to share that the superintendent's updates, and you could look up on the screen right now. Over the last couple of months, I've had them just sort of dropped into the agenda for people to find them, and I've been sharing that at our regular meetings, and particularly at the Outer Islands, because oftentimes they can't make it, so I just sort of do my report with them and then put it on their agenda. But I also wanted it a little bit more easily to find for the public. So on the AOS website, on the right side, there is the monthly update, and folks can go there and see the superintendent's updates. For right now, the one that will come up will be the existing one. So the January one will pop up after our meeting, and it'll show up there, and then folks can go back in history and check on me and sort of look through those reports. So I just wanted to make them a little bit more easily accessible for folks to see them, so now they're directly on the website. So I wanted to make sure I shared that. And now for this one.
You don't have enough tabs.
What's that?
You don't have enough tabs.
I don't have enough tabs. Absolutely not. All right, so this is the superintendent's update for our January board meeting. And just a reminder, our service promise is to interrupt educational inequities and create schools where every child and staff member thrive one conversation at a time. Our January enrollment is the same as December, and actually it was only just a a few weeks ago that we met, and then we had the break. So there hasn't been a lot of movement. And oftentimes a lot of that movement is either folks moving in or moving out. And so a comment came up at one of the local board meetings and sort of talking about enrollment and thinking about, is there a way to get information overall about sort of the movement and the changing numbers, and what are some of the factors that are behind that? And so I'll work with principals to sort of think about a way of kind of tracking that in a way that kind of looks at how that migration kind of happens in and out of schools, because oftentimes we share just the really direct numbers. Staffing update. We're looking pretty good as compared to the last 2 years in terms of the staffing issues that we had across the board coming out of COVID. We're finally settling out. I mean, we still have positions in speech and language in one of our schools in Trenton, looking for a behavior interventionist to support one of our schools, special education, always looking for bus drivers and coaches and substitutes, and special education data support positions is still out there. We were able to fill custodial positions in Tremont and here at the high school recently, so those have come off. But again, on this slide, you can go to the blue here, and then you can look at all of the positions for the particular schools that are still within the district. But we're in a much better place than we have been. School highlights. At the high school, some students and staff attended the Olympia Snow Women's Leadership Institute, and you could look at the chalk talk and sort of see some of the interesting things that folks there. It's a sort of women's leadership institute that happens every year. Semester 1 comes to a close later this month, and so that transition will be happening, and it's almost like the start of a new school year when you hit the end of the semester for a bunch of those teachers, and hence we have that day that's going to help support that transition to a new year with semester 2 for some of those classes. And we had mentioned the Visual Symphony art show that was up here at the school. It has moved, and a lot of that art and the compositions around what drove the art that the students did are on display at Chocolate Latte in Bar Harbor through February. So if you're sitting having a cup of coffee, you can walk around and see some of the great work that students put together. Over at Ashley Bryan, they've been completing their mid-year assessments, and that's been going on actually across the district. The school is participating in a Winter Kids program where schools across the Maine can compete, and they are provided information on some climate information and some science and outdoor activities that kids to do, and they could win up to $5,000, I believe it is, as they complete the tasks that they do. It gets kids outside, and there's a learning component to it. And students and staff will be participating in a contra dance workshop over at the Northeast Harbor Library. They're doing that with the community school, and so that's going to be an exciting day, and potentially an evening, because then there's going to be a contra dance in the evening. Frenchboro is holding steady. I'm going to be working with that board starting this month on sort of their transition budget, and sort of thinking about what a holding pattern looks like for them on the island, since they still don't have any students there. Connors Emerson foundation work is continuing for zones 1 and 2, and it's kind of neat. You can sort of see that work happening over on the far end of where the playground used to be, and so that's always exciting driving in there. Third grade students read with kindergarten buddies going down into the classes, so that's something that happens regularly there. And second graders have been learning about seed structures through model building of different types of seeds and how they exist and why they work the way they do. Over in Trenton, 8th graders visited HCTC as sort of part of the program of making sure that 8th grade students understand what some of the opportunities that they'll have when they get into high school. Coach Johnson started his weightlifting club. It's pretty cool. You can go back into where his office is. It's quite the little workout room. And K4 participated in a Balloons on Broadway, which is a book that sort of talks about the Thanksgiving parade. And then that experience was turned into sort of an art and a literacy experiences where the kids read the book and then they created some of their own balloons, that they made their own balloons. And then they did a tour sort of around the school, so that was pretty exciting. And they had a Grinch literacy night. Over at Pematic, the interest survey went out for families for pre-K, and those schools that have pre-Ks going into next year doing sort of similar work. The fourth graders started a book club in collaboration with Southwest Harbor Library called Frizzy, Clarabelle Ortega. There's going to be adult makerspace classes beginning soon, so if you go to the Pematic website, you'll sort of see when those start popping up. They haven't been scheduled yet, but it's something that Mike will be doing with the materials that he has available at the school. And the 7th grade and 8th grade guitars, which I think I talked about before, they're building guitars and then they're going to be playing them for the spring concert. And I told them that I'd be happy to, if they share the chords with me, I'll go on stage with them and play, because sometimes I play the guitar. But you could see their guitars at Vinyl Vogue, so it's in the old Newberry department store there in Ellsworth between January 24th and 31st, so that'll be a cool thing to take a look at. Over on Swans, in Spanish class, they have been working on how to say the days of the week and share the weather of the day in Spanish. 3rd through 8th graders have been learning about respecting differences in guidance class. And in PE, they've been doing handball and frisbee skills to perfection. And so, watch out for playing frisbee with the Swans Island kiddos. They're going to be really good. Over at Mount Desert, they have a cooking club that's going to be beginning this week, and they have an art show. So the art that has been done at the school through the years is going to be on display in the Millen Room at the Northeast Harbor Library. And 7th graders there are embarking on a composting project that will encompass the whole school. And over in Tremont, they had a project called Gingerbread Habitats, which is pretty interesting to sort of learn about. The pre-K2 and Sun students, prior to the holiday, went around town in Tremont and Southwest Harbor caroling. And then Andrew Simon, who works with Healthy Acadia, did a workshop on creativity with the pre-K kiddos and on character for 4th graders. And then just recently, the 8th graders came to the school board and did a wonderful presentation about getting permission to go out of state for their 8th grade class trip, which is going to be to Boston. And they sort of talked about how they picked it and the things that they chose that they wanted to see when they were there, and are doing the fundraising for that. And then so budgets. So what I've done on this slide as you cruise it, I'll be highlighting in yellow budgets once they pass, so you can sort of see where we are across the district. The AOS has passed Connors, Emerson, and Cranberry, so you can sort of take a look at what their numbers are for fiscal year coming up, and then what that was. That first number is the budget to budget, and the assessment is the one afterwards. And then you can sort of see where each school is in terms of their budget process. And so we have a bunch of budgets this week and next to the process to finalize. I believe all my town meetings and dates are correct as you go through, so you can sort of see where we are. As we get through more of them, I'll talk a little bit more about the budgets overall, what that looks like. MDIRSS updates, Vision of a Graduate. So please join us for any of the upcoming sessions and add your voice to our work. And so I listed the dates and the times. So we have the Tremont Consolidated School on the 15th of this month at 6 p.m. On the 29th, we'll be at the Northeast Harbor Library at 5:30. So please come. That will also, there'll be a hybrid online option to that. So will folks be able to see that through our website or the Northeast Harbor?
The library is
through
going
the
to help
library
us with that, yes.
So
So they're going to advertise that one and post us.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then on the Outer Islands, we have the Longfellow School over on Great Cranberry. We're going to be doing that in the morning in February, and on the 26th at the Ashley Bryan School on Islesford. And then Swans will be April 2nd at 3:15. And then I wanted to share that the high school adult ed program received recognition as a top performing program by the DOE for the FY24 school year in the areas of exceeding the state's measurable skills gains and their post-test rate. And so they were well above the state expectations in terms of meeting the the needs of the folks who are coming back to school to sort of re-engage in education. And I think the folks, I'll be highlighting them later, do a really wonderful job of taking care of our students that are sort of coming back into the fold after some time away. Which leads me to the staff spotlight. I wanted to highlight Kurt Lockhart, who was longtime custodian at Connors Emerson. He retired at the end of 2024 after 30 years of service to the Bar Harbor School and its community. And his wife Karen, who worked at Tremont for a very long time. Michelle Brzezowski and Ann Patterson, I highlighted them because of the award that they got. Ann recently retired, and Lauren Krasinski is now taken over, but they work hard to earn that top performing distinction and a recognition that learning is a constant, and they support all our students to sort of finish their education no matter when they're coming back. Kylie Foster, that is the first grade teacher at Trenton who came up with the balloon idea for the K4 folks. And she has become an integral part after this is her second year over at Trenton, and her creativity is infectious and it touches all students and staff alike. So it's really exciting to have her down at that end of the hall. And then I wanted to highlight John DeGrassa, who is the new head custodian here at the high school. His last name may be familiar, it's Crystal DeGrassa's husband. And he has come into the high school as the head custodian in the morning and helps coordinate some of the folks in the evening, and has already sort of set himself up for great appreciation for his work and attention to detail. And the thing that kind of sparked it for me was it was a really windy day, and so oftentimes when that happens, you open the doors and leaves kind of go around and things collect, and a bunch of leaves came flying into the building, and the next thing you know, he's out there and went all around to take care of that, so none of that would happen again. So he's just been a great addition, and is working well with the staff and folks here, so excited to have him. And then I wanted to highlight, people may have seen in the paper that in December, Dick Ordway passed away, and he was the music director here at the high school for 22 years, and 3 years over at Connors Emerson, and many people consider him the father of the program here at the high school. And so Selena and I actually went back to the file to kind of take a look at when he started, and Indian paper and typewriter and all of that. And so I just wanted to sort of highlight that. And reorganization. Our next meeting is February 12th. We'll be talking about voting, which that means one of the 14 piece things that we had to decide as RPC is to talk about whether or not, when it comes to the referendum, is that referendum going to be an all or nothing referendum, or is the referendum going to be, well, if these core towns say yes and these towns say no, then we'll still move forward. That's something that the RPC gets to decide in their process. And then we're going to discuss community messaging. I wanted to share that we've gone through all but 2 of the 14 pieces. The voting piece is left. There's a couple other ancillary things, but the RPC has done an admirable job of working through all the expectations of the required elements of the plan that we have to send to the state. And after February, then we're going to start putting together what that would look like in terms of coming out to communities and sort of sharing what that reorganization plan looks like, and all the hard work that this group has done to try to find something that we can vote on that can help move us forward as a district. You'll also notice if you go to the reorganization website, there's a new FAQ there, so you can sort of look back and look for frequently asked questions. that pop up often. I want to thank Cindy Lambert for really sort of going back to a bunch of the notes from the RPC and the work that we have done, and listening to staff as she has been going around and listening to staff and putting together answers to questions that we have so you can find them in an easier place. So they're there on the reorganization website, so please check that out. And then finally, I just wanted to highlight for years and years, you may have heard it here at the board level, another board may have heard about it, about the Social Security windfall elimination, which basically meant that if you were a teacher, a police officer, a firefighter within the state of Maine, and you were part of the Maine state pension system, then any monies that you accrued within Social Security in a different part of your life, if you always were working, in the public domain, then you weren't going to receive those benefits. And I think there are 11 states across the country. And oftentimes, and I heard whether it's as an assistant principal or a principal, and people were coming out of state, that made a difference to whether or not they would want to come here. Because they may have been receiving Social Security someplace else, or they were building that up, and then you come to work in the state of Maine, and then you're not going to be able to access that. And so many letters have been written to Senator Snowe, Senator Collins, back in the day, and Senator Pingree, Representative Pingree and Golden and Nishu and others to try to work on it. And it actually passed, and President Biden signed it. And so a big thanks to Senator Collins and King and our representatives Pingree and Golden for sort of helping to push that through this year. So that's a great thing for folks here in the state of Maine. And then I just wanted to share, if folks did sign up for the legislative update, Robbie Feinberg did send his little notice out, and then I got a brief from at the superintendent's meeting for Hancock County. And that governor's budget has been passed off to the legislature. And in terms of education, the big pieces that are highlighted in that budget are maintaining the 55% of the state's obligation to education, the continuation of providing free school meals to all Maine students, the maintenance of the 5% revenue sharing for municipalities that helps to offset property taxes, and the continuation of making the community college option permanent for students in the state of Maine. So those are the big four things that went out in the information that was sent to me, and so now that's off to the legislature as they begin their work, but I wanted to be able to highlight that for you all. And I did want to share just sort of a quick update that I didn't put it on there, is that I don't have any new news in terms of the Power School data situation. And as soon as we get more information about that, on any real impacts that might be coming, or any of the tools that they have shared that they're hoping to sort of send out and make available to people, I will send that out to folks. But our last update was on Thursday of last week. But we're continuing to monitor and have conversations with Power School about any local impacts we may feel. And hopefully not. And that the notice that information was removed, and we're assured of that. We'll just continue to strengthen our own servers, and we all have to sort of be careful and possibly pay attention to what we're doing online and how that may impact us.
Any questions for Mike? Okay, moving on to directors of teaching and learning.
So I guess we should start with Vision of the Graduate. We had our PEMATIC meeting prior to the break. So that's 3 schools down, and you can see our list of next scheduled dates. We're continuing to move slow and steady. We are also working with Jeff Seaman and Kate Meyer at the high school. They co-teach a class called Design Thinking. And in that class, students are going to partner with us to help conduct interviews, to make sure we're getting student voices included, and folks who are not in our profile hats. So we are asking people to just share your hat you're wearing. Are you a community member? Are you a business person? Or, that type of thing, just so we can kind of get a sense of representation, and then the students are also going to help us kind of reach out and be more proactive in getting more data. So we continue with that process. No conversation is the same. Susan went to 2 different ones, so she probably could attest to that, but I thought we would just open for a moment and just share and Pematic reflections on how that conversation went. I know, it's before the break. It's okay, you don't have to, but it's just an opportunity to share any reflections.
I think it was really interesting just to be prompted. I think anytime we get to kind of be prompted to think about something in general, about in a in a space where that's the focus is good, because we're all so busy and always moving around. So and it was also so interesting to hear different people's perspectives, and to some people approach it with a little bit more of like a tangible approach. Like your mom had really great ideas, but it was like, wow, like some people a bit more like concrete. And so just to hear those different perspectives was a good reminder that there's a lot of good ideas out there and a lot of benefit that different thinking can bring. I would encourage everyone to, try and attend the session.
And invite your moms.
Smaller.
Bring your moms.
It was so much smaller, it was a completely different animal, and it felt like, there were
Well, I'm glad you mentioned, it was a small but mighty conversation, and the high school one was bigger and, equally as powerful, just different, yeah. Awesome.
Do you want to get the perspective of local employers, or?
They're invited,
Okay.
so yes. Yes, and we would definitely have parents saying, well, I'm wearing 2 hats, so, but yes. It's okay. That's right. Well, thank you. I'll move on now to the note, and actually, I just want to share the screen link. So if you. So at the end of the note was the link to the sessions. So I did want to take a moment to just make sure that you scrolled all the way down and saw the sessions we're offering for January 22nd are also hyperlinked in there. But if you're at the January note, we are basically gearing up for a training on January 22nd. Some people are excited, some people are leery, and some people are more extreme than those. So we definitely have some, we're going in not as, big cheerleaders, but as informed people who are trying to get up to speed on this and know how to support and navigate our students. So that's sort of our stance in doing this, and we have, we're not doing it alone. This is not something where I'm an expert, Rhonda's not an expert. And we've really asked for community partnerships to help us through this process. So since September, we've been meeting weekly. Greg Cox from College of the Atlantic, who just wrote a book on it, he's been attending. Linda Fuller, who works with education training students, has been attending. David Sharon, who has a computer science business, he's been attending. The MLTI ambassadors, so that's basically a huge initiative on part of the state where they've taken teachers and retrained them and kind of helping to support tech integration. And this is a huge part of their job right now, and there's many tech integrators, and we're getting them all for January 22nd, because apparently we're taking the lead on this one. And they're free and available for us, and they're cutting their teeth, I guess, with us on this presentation this day. So Did I miss anybody? I feel like I'm missing some. The librarians and our tech folks as well. Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. You can't invite too many people because then you have this huge meeting. But we have a good 15 people attending regularly to this, and this evolved out of that work. So our weekly work evolved out of just teaching each other what we're learning, offering resources, what we're hearing teachers may want to be familiar with, etc. And so we designed a pretty varied day. We're all going to experience a keynote together, and I would welcome all of you to attend. You're welcome to attend. It'll be informative. You'll hear what we're hearing. And then we have follow-up sessions, which again, I would invite all of you to attend. We are inviting neighbors from Hancock County. A lot of folks from Ellsworth are attending because they want to see what we're doing, and then see if they can take it back to their own spaces. So we've opened our doors to the whole county. They kicked me off. Okay. Let's see. We did assign. We are putting all the sessions where we have our strongest connectivity, and this will be another test to see whether or not we can handle it. But let's see.
Maybe the AIs can soon run this part.
But part of what we're talking about is AI hygiene. It does require more energy, and so we want to be mindful of that. There are some environmental concerns. We're going to talk about that and work through it. Oh, it's not working. Well, anyways, it's hyperlinked in the note at the very bottom, and you can see there's a variety of sessions from how to use AI to leverage Google Sheets. So we've kind of put some data mining there, and we're talking about social emotional learning and those impacts. That's actually a pretty popular session right now. Some philosophical pieces, that's really Gray's part. Any questions on the day?
Okay, now, one of the most exciting times of the year is upon us, which is we get to discuss the 25-26 school calendar. Everyone have a calendar?
All right, so I'd like to start just by highlighting the folks who are on the committee that helped sort of work through this. And that was Lydia Stiles from the high school, Michelle Lear representing elementary teachers. She teaches over at Tremont. Crystal DeGrasso was a K-8 principal. Matt Haney from the high school. Rhonda was a part of the group. Jessica Stewart from the board. Selena Dunbar has done a lot of calendars over the years. Amazing insight. Myself and Mike Kears couldn't make the first meeting, and I unfortunately forgot to add him to the invites. But I'm going to attach him to, because some of this work is going to continue for the next calendar year. So I'll sort of talk about that. And some of the sort of the big themes that I want you to know before I actually go through all of the dates is, number one, there was a focus on compliance. And that was on, making sure we hit our school days. And then I'm pretty passionate about our HCTC kiddos and ensuring that they are getting their days in school. Number two was sort of maximizing some continuous weeks. We heard that that's really important for families, and teachers around the table sort of supported that. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And the third was maintaining our early releases in a way that, in trying to meet some of those other needs, we're still sort of maintaining the idea of trying to have at least 5 district-based days to sort of support our integration across schools, and the 4 school-based days that are as closely as possible linked to the 6-week cycle. But because of some of the other features of maximizing continuous weeks and where some of the holidays and PD showed up, we couldn't necessarily hit that those are happening every 6 weeks. I think it's 6, 8, and 9 along the way. And then we sort of talked about maximizing, talking about some of the staff preferences around start date, continuous weeks of schools, and moving PT conferences. And so in the area of compliance, I just want to remind folks that for the state, there's a minimum of 180 days of school, 175 for instruction being student days. And we sort of meet those. We have 184 staff days. And for HCTC, you cannot be out of compliance no more than 5 student days. And so oftentimes we sort of bump up against that and do our best to, if we're at 3 or 4 or 5, make sure that we provide, if HCTC is having school, that we're providing busing for those days. In this calendar, we are at 5 days on the nose. And so I wanted to sort of make folks aware about that. And then in terms of the maximization, in this current calendar, we had 16 weeks where there was either a PD or a holiday or sort of an early release sort of within that week. I will say that I consider days of school with an early release on it still a full week of school, and our principals and staff work really hard even on those days that kids are getting a full experience. But in terms of trying to think about until we get to that point, making sure the calendar has as many of those 5-day full weeks as sort of possible. And so the new calendar has 21 of those weeks instead of 16. And then in terms of maintaining the early releases, we did our very best to sort of use those strategically throughout the months. And so one of the first things you'll see that from the requests from staff and after my conversations with some superintendents, we are still starting school before Labor Day. Things will drastically change when that Labor Day switches on that first Monday of September. But we start our PD in that last week of October. This current calendar year, August, that first calendar, this calendar year, we're starting a week ahead of time. So we were able to do that this year. That teacher day is our first day where kids at HCTC would be going to school. So that's our one day that we miss, that we're off. September is pretty clean, except for we have that early release in the holiday. When you get into October, we have the holiday week, and that first early release is the preparation for no, that's not the conferences. That's the
second. The one on the 31st is for parents.
Is for parent-teacher conferences. That first one, I believe, is a district day. The first school-based day. So that's around 6 weeks after. And then in November, you notice we moved the PD day from January. That 10th was a school day, and around the table, that almost seemed like silly to come to school, and then you have a break, and can we utilize that differently as a way of sort of, again, thinking about that maximization. And so we have a PD day there, the holiday, and then the weeks of school. And then in November, most of our other partners across Hancock County have PD days around the Thanksgiving holiday. Those 2 early releases, one of those is a district day and one of those is a school-based day. And the committee, when we were talking, were thinking about matching those up Number one, because then on one of those afternoons, on the district day, some of our teachers take advantage of some of the work that might be going on within the broader Hancock County, but also provide an opportunity for teachers to have an afternoon where they're looking at district priorities on that first day and then seeing how that plays out in their schools and connecting those together. And that takes some early releases out of the rest of the weeks, again, trying to hit that maximizing of the full weeks. In December, we chose to have in those 2 days, so that PD day on the 10th is actually a day that other folks are going to school, and so that's number 2 for HCTC. In December, there were 2 days of school, and the rest of Hancock County, it's a full day and then a half a day. Based on the starter school, we decided that we'll do the 2 full weeks for the December break. Because you have that holiday coming back in January. You could have come back to school on the 2nd on a Friday. That seemed kind of silly, so we had that as a no school day. In January, you have your standard Martin Luther King holiday, and then we have that teacher day, which is in support of that transition for the high school and for the elementary schools around reporting. And so that day is there. That's the 5th day that's out of alignment with HCTC. Then February, we have an early release before the holiday. And then in March, the original calendar that you all saw, that PD day was on the 20th. However, all of our Hancock County partners, the PD day was on the 13th. That was, I think, an oversight on my part when we built the calendar, because we always across the region try to match that up in the original count. So that would have been day 6. So I moved that day on Friday after doing counting and recognizing, oh, we're out, and moved that day up. And the early release down, that early release connects to the parent-teacher conferences in the spring. And then the rest for April and May and then June, we just interspersed those early released school days and district days to match what we try to do in terms of our early releases and having some sense of the cycle. Elementary conferences are in November. I can't remember what the green box was.
No, sorry, not the green box, the blue box in March, at the end of the month. March.
There's also one in November.
That's elementary.
Parent teachers, common teachers.
The blue is elementary teacher conferences. Green is the high school.
Okay.
I should know that.
And we wanted to wait, why not just finish?
It's even green, so you know that should trigger you. And then this group, I had asked if they were interested in continuing, because I think, and I am still interested in continuing and thinking about how to support a regular early release for our elementary school folks to do the work that they have to do. When we look across our region, not only are they supporting that work for their teachers, but as we had identified early on, I think it's important work for teachers to be able to have that time to really focus on the instruction that they're doing within the classroom. And so one of the big things that sort of came out of our exploration of that a year ago was making sure if that was a proposal, then there has to be something in place that would support families for their students. And so that's something that group is still interested in doing. They're probably going to pull in another elementary principal as part of that work and talk to Mike and then have some meetings for the remainder of this year on thinking about what the 26-27 calendar could look like, and maybe have some things that would support that type of regular early release. So we want to make sure that the work will continue and sort of think along those veins.
Questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there, I know it'd be a huge shift, but is there a desire from, I guess particularly maybe the high school teachers to be able to end the semester before the Christmas holiday versus taking that 2 week, or taking that long break and then having another 2 weeks and then starting over?
I don't know if there's enough instructional days.
In order to do that, you would get way out of whack with HCTC.
Yeah.
That was one of the things we looked at like 5 or 6 years ago when we did a similar process. And as long as we have that constraint, it's not really. But that would be great.
I'm just curious.
Would you also have to go to
Desire
school?
that.
You'd have to start in the middle of August.
Yeah.
Carrie?
I'm wondering if we have any feedback from people with young children or principals who are here in the room about how people are doing with the early release schedules, how families are doing.
It's very difficult.
Yeah.
We're not doing.
We feel like they're in school just long enough to have to go and pick them up. It's a waste of our time.
Especially if you work like far from the school.
And there's no services in place to kind of really support it, so.
I don't understand why they need 10 days off. Why couldn't they go to school Monday, Tuesday of that December? It seems like every year the Christmas break gets longer. Christmas, 16 days they'll be at home.
I think that this is the only time when holidays fall on a Thursday that it's a full 2 weeks off. I think any other day that the holiday falls on, it's usually there are a day or two where they go.
That is correct. We received feedback that people didn't want a situation of having one school day, like, you know, you have I don't think the expectation is that every year, I hear what you're saying, that would be 2 full weeks. It's only because, people didn't want to come back for one, like a Friday and then, go.
But that's a good question, because like the 22nd and 23rd, you could be in school. Unless you're traveling, and if you're traveling, like,
I don't know, speaking totally anecdotally, I feel like I went on this, like, even in the good old days, 1988 or something, I feel like you weren't usually in school. That's unique to our system. Usually. I don't think we were usually in school up to the 23rd. When I was, I feel like that's usually part of vacation.
Usually it's a half day, like growing up.
The
In the 90s. For me, on the 90s, it was a half a day on the 23rd.
Okay.
I think the majority of our partners, when we looked at that, another reason that we were looking at that was part of that is I think in some of our earlier versions, if we were starting PD in that third week of August, that having that longer time in December would be helpful. But currently, our other regional partners are having a full day on that Monday and a half a day on that Tuesday.
The 22nd.
Yeah, the 22nd and 23rd. So
When you say regional partners,
that would be
Hancock.
Hancock, Lemoyne, RSU 24. So that's down east, Ellsworth, and RSU 25, which is Bucksport, and then Blue Hill and Duval. Those three are.
So they're all doing a day and a half.
They're all the calendars that I saw. They were doing the day and the regular, just a regular old early release day, like back in the day.
Was the input you got from teachers, or from parents,
Teachers.
from students?
Teachers.
No, students. I received feedback from my students. I mean, this is not like they wanted to always, but yeah.
I know, that's.
I was homeschooled, but I feel like back in my day, but I know that we had two fall
Elderly?
I can't remember that so long.
Sorry, Marie.
All right, so I want to piggyback on a couple things. So the 22nd and the 23rd, I couldn't find the calendar online. I just don't know how to get around the new website for some reason, the current calendar. But didn't we go to school for 2 days before Christmas this year?
No. We went to school 2 days right after the 1st. Thursday, Friday, so it wasn't a
Okay.
full 2 weeks off.
Okay,
It
but
was
we had
before.
2 days we had 2 days, they were just after,
But not
but,
before.
but not before, but there's 2 days before that are available, and our regional partners are doing that, and
Because
So-
Christmas Eve is a Tuesday this year.
correct, right, I'm just, so I'm just saying, I'm using that as like background for like
Past years, for that.
supporting,
Yeah, the current calendar, the 23rd, 24th, those days we were out of school.
understood. I'm talking about this calendar.
Yeah.
22 and 23 is something that seems like it's on the table. Like if we were trying to fill in, yes, we can't, like I get that we don't want to send the kids back to school for a day, but we certainly can, like,
I'm not
this is,
wed to those 2 days.
I mean, I think the thing is like, and it kind of goes into like my second comment, which is about Thanksgiving. Like, I know that over the years, there's always different people on the committee. They have different feelings. There's different vibes that are going on. There's different opinions. Sometimes it's very teacher heavy. Sometimes it's very community heavy. I get all those factors, and I can see how. And I love the fact that there's so many weeks that are full. I think like one of the things I remember when we had a big shift, if there's anybody here that remembers this, maybe Julie is like the only person that's been on this long. Sorry, Julie. We had this big shift where we had teachers literally coming here and saying, please don't make a long break at Thanksgiving because we can't stand to have these kids out of the classroom for that long. There's so much learning that's lost. Like, so they had us, we had testimony after testimony after testimony, and that's when we clawed back Thanksgiving break. We no longer had no full week off. We even suggested as a board, why don't we put 2 PD days in there? Because we were told we can't do PD. Again, I know things have changed. It's gotten way harder, I get it. We were told we can't do PD, it's really hard to do PD that week because it's just like our brains are fried anyway. And so that doesn't even work. Like we've got to have kids in school for this time. Like we've got to have instruction. That was like a big thing. It was a big testimony and a big shift for our calendar that we had for a long, long, long time with that break. And I think you heard a lot from local families saying like it's kind of like a hard for us too because a lot of families are seasonal or they're like finishing with like their fishing gigs or they're finishing with their lobstering or they're finishing with carpentry, they've got a break time in there, and they're like, this is great, like we actually have time to be with our families. So, but we changed the calendar and it seemed to work. So for me, seeing like 2 early releases there is like, that's like, for me, that's like the worst of all the worlds. It's like, not only, it's like, it's not even, it doesn't count as like if we're, like you said, your perspectives were like keeping compliance, keeping in time, keeping HCTC, making continuous weeks and making sure you are like, really supporting like half days and the PD that teachers need in those half days. What about making it as like easy as possible for families to want to send their kids to school in a week and like not want to take that off? And I think you see a lot of families that said, fine, if we hear you, like we hear you that you want our kids here for that time. We hear you, we get it. And now to put like ER, I'm kind of like, I would be out of here like in a minute and you would not see compliance from my family. I'm not kidding, and I don't think you will. So I don't think that's supporting in any way, shape, or form, like trying to keep kids in school. It's not, I really have some questions about that. So that and this giant break at Christmas, again, it feels like we were told over and over again, like that's like Saturday, Sunday, and then 5, that's 7, and then 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, can't count, 13, 14, 15, that's 16 days. That's like the longest spread, like
10 school days.
It's 10 school, right, but it doesn't matter if it's 10 school, just like we have a 5-day break in January. Yeah, there's only 2 days of it. Like, I mean, that's a huge amount of time, and we're talking about kids, we know the kids that we have that are on the cusp of, very vulnerable. We know families that are vulnerable, and I just don't understand, like, I'm verklempt over these 2 breaks, and especially the ER on those days because of what we heard over and over and over and over again from teachers and administrators about how important it was to have kids in school and to claw back that vacation time. And so to do these early releases, I think that's even harder for parents too, because a lot of parents, like, maybe they don't even have, like, it's hard to, sometimes it's easier to plan for like a day of no school than it is to plan for like a half day. Like, you might not have the annual leave, you might not have the vacation time, you might, I don't know, I would really ask you to reconsider that unless I'm missing something, but like based on like previous conversations, I would ask you to reconsider that. I know there's not a lot of places to put those. And I would ask you to really think critically about the break in December and what that looks like. So that's my opinion.
Eliza and then Susan.
I mean, I think I'm just like sort of putting this out there generally. I'm hearing some like conflicting feedback, which I think is like what you guys are doing here with this Tetris game. And I totally get that like we're trying to maximize more full weeks. I think like that was what was heard.
That was our charge.
That was a big important thing that we were talking about a lot. So I think we're between a rock and a hard place because we have to now figure out how to fit these. I think that Thanksgiving week does look really tricky. The ERs are really hard, and scooting those around will cut down on full weeks, which I think will also be a huge problem for a lot of families too. I'm just putting it out there. That's it. Last time that I think a lot of the spice in this particular meeting was about not having enough full weeks of instruction. So I think we're kind of, that's not super constructive. I'm just sort of saying, I think this is like, we're either going to be choosing where to, yes, exactly.
Having done this so long, I will say the evolution is not linear, it's very circular. Like we have come around and around. But one thing, I'm in agreement, I don't think we need those. I think they should be in school on the 22nd and 23rd, and I don't love the early release for Thanksgiving. The thing that we haven't talked about, that we always hear about from employers and student workers, is starting before Labor Day. And in many, many years, we have not started after. So I'm like, mathing here is like, let's go here and have the first student day be on the 2nd. I mean, we haven't tried that for this. For bringing it back. Well, how far out? Yeah.
That would take 3 days. We're already at 5 out of the plan.
And I wasn't tracking where the rest of them were.
If you add those days back to Christmas, does it add a day back to
Yeah.
Yeah, but then I would argue that they're going to lose those first 3 days of school, and then you're asking them to go to school when the rest of their kids, the rest of the peers, peers aren't. And maybe next year when Labor Day sort of shifts and all that changes, it's going to be a different conversation. And I'd rather not sacrifice that time. If we can gain 2 days at the Christmas time, I'm more than happy to give that back.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say, I just didn't want that to not be brought up because it's every year.
Yeah.
But also, I am fully with the full weeks, but I'm actually more for consistent weeks. So, if, again, I know this was also shot down years ago, but a weekly early release, here we go, back around again.
But with support for parents.
Yes, because that needs to happen no matter what, it sounds like. Like, that seems like a non-negotiable that we need. And there was like a subcommittee at one point that was going to talk about
The next round of this committee is going to be, that's going to be what we're looking at for next year. We're going to try and get a jump on it.
So, Maria? I won't repeat, I'm fully in agreement with what's already been said. And I just want to point out that, like, again, sometimes we talk about the kids that are disadvantaged, where, like, that is hard to think about when, there's families where the kids, they might not be getting a meal, whatever, but then there's also the kids that are, when they're at home for this long, 16 days, 7, whatever that was, they're regressing in some things because they're getting certain services and help in school, and by the end of that, like day 16, you're just like, okay, my kid really needs to be back in this world of structure where they're getting that consistency and those, whatever the tools are, I'll leave it at that. So I feel like that's also a consideration.
I agree with that. I took a trip and it hadn't taken one in a while, but coming back and having mid-assessments after such a long break was like, I mean, I think even people not taking a trip, it's like, well, they're not gonna be, they're at their best. So I thought that was kind of weird.
Carrie, and then Alicia.
So I just wanted to clarify on the HCTC point. Are you saying that the HCTC kids could go to school, just those kids on those days if we started a little later? Or is it not allowed that only HCTC kids go to school?
It's not, the state doesn't officially, if you say, hey, we'll provide a bus, the state still doesn't, they still consider those days out of adjustment, and you can get, you're out of compliance. And then you're having to tell kids to go to school and others are not.
And I understand that, but I also feel like HCTC is a special program for these kids. They're getting opportunities to do something different than what their peers are doing. So I don't absolutely hate the idea that they might be asked to go to school on days that their peers aren't, just because they're getting this extra thing.
It's 50 plus.
And they've chosen that.
They've chosen
that
it, right. And so maybe when you choose something that's different than what is regular school, then you have to make some concessions, which might be that you start school 2 days earlier than your peers do. But my point was also, if it's gonna put us out of compliance, then it's more of a concern.
It puts us out of compliance, and I lost what I was gonna say. It's a compliance thing, as well. Now I lost what I had, which I thought was really
and we've talked about this before. I mean, I really feel like any day that we can gain in August and September and push later into the calendar helps, because we have such a hard time, especially at Tremont School, with getting our ed techs, especially into the building. And for those kids to start, those kids who are our most needy kids to start without those supports because we're short-staffed, I think that's really detrimental to their education. So I'm always for starting the calendar later.
And I think that number, that idea that staff are, I don't know if that number is as high as we think it is. Because I think I looked into it and it was maybe 2 staff.
But maybe, am I being dense? Or did you say we cannot change the HCTC calendar? Is that they have to do?
That's the one that drives, so
It's set though already?
yes, yeah, that is set.
Why
That
is
is
it
set.
set?
Well, we work on it all together, and I tried to get the date pushed
Okay.
just because, and everybody was open to it, but it didn't work out. And I think part of that is knowing that the way the calendar flows is that first Monday in September is going to shift, and then everything is going to be grand, and we'll be starting, much later. And actually, this calendar here does start later than last year in terms of getting support staff, if that's an issue for folks. So it is in that final week or before. Last year, we were like ahead in the starting of school. But I guess I'll just sort of, we would be sort of out of compliance, and I feel that, they choose that, but that's their high school, that's part of their high school education. And so I think it's really important, especially at the beginning of those days, to, we're already asking them to make a choice by being out of compliance 5 days. If this calendar is the way it is, we're already asking them to be out 5 days. And then, so that, that kind of seems unfair.
I'm sorry, out of compliance just means that they should be going to HCTC, but they're not.
The
because
state
we have the days
says-
off,
yeah,
HCTC programs running.
The state is not, the state also penalizes us for being out of compliance. It's not just about the students.
Got it, okay.
Yeah, I worry most about the students. I want to make sure that they're maximizing that choice that they're making. And yes, it's a choice, but it's an important one that I think folks would consider in terms of the needs of particularly the trades in our area, that we want to be able to maximize that opportunity that we can't provide them solely here, at this high school.
I think it's incredibly important for them to have that opportunity. I just think it's also incredibly important for our most endangered kids to have the support staff that they need. And we've seen it for several years running at Tremont, that we can't get some of our ed techs in the door until later in the season. And so we've got our principal playing ed tech. What's the penalty for being out of compliance?
state subsidy pieces. But again, that's my biggest concern is the kids. I'm gonna advocate for them, and I'll advocate for them hard because I think that's an important program. Or, knowing that the calendar is going to shift again, and if it's just going to move that way, and if as a region, we can slowly sort of move towards that starting after Labor Day, if that's a concern overall. I think I did a pretty good job of putting it out there, and people listened, and everybody had different calendars. And the funny thing is, some of my colleagues came back and said their teachers' associations and communities wanted to start beforehand. And so, it's just kind of, it's always an interesting dance to do it, every year. But I know next year will be very different because that Monday holiday is in a different place in terms of starting. It's gonna go, well, it's pretty good for a little while, then it goes the other way, and it does this thing.
September 7th, 2026, and then it starts to backtrack. Then it's the 6th, the 5th. I just looked it up because I was curious, so I just looked it up.
Been doing it for years. It's just that, the calendar moves and you have to move with it. Well,
Oh, yeah, Misha.
Jared also has.
Misha and Jared.
I have two questions. One is, what do we know about absenteeism on early release days?
I haven't really took a look at it, but
Because my experience is like teachers are writing notes home to parents saying, no, it really is a school day. They really need to come to school. I'm getting the sense that like they're, that some people are working really hard to get their kids to, to figure out how to handle those days, but then they're showing up at a day, and it's no judgment. I mean, like, people have got trips and things to plan, but someone looks at this calendar and starts to like write off those, especially those, I totally agree about those 2 early release days before Thanksgiving. I'm like, that's not school. Like, no one's coming that day, or if you're coming, you're like one of 3 kids that's in your class, and so you can't actually have real school that day. But I'm concerned. I mean, I completely also agree with like the concerns about not, we need to have these spaces for, but if we're gonna have these days that like half the class isn't there.
Anecdotally, I didn't see it as a principal, but I can only ask my principals here if they had noticed a appreciable difference in absenteeism on early release days. I don't know. It'd be interesting to take a look at each. I think
yeah, in some ways it feels like I know they count as full days and they get us to 175, but that's per the state or whatever. And my question really is like, are they really counting? Because we already have pretty low number of instructional days for our kids relative to some other places. And then I guess a second related question that I think I know the answer to, but I remember when we were talking about a regular day, we were not talking about 12:30. We were talking about like a later time, and I think that was possible because if it was a regular day, there'd be more of them, or something about getting all the planning time in. But is that 12:30 being the time that is early release? Are we stuck to that, or is it possible to get a little bit more of an instructional day and a little bit less of a hardship for families out of our early release days?
I guess I'd start by answering. I think right now in this calendar, what we're thinking that 12, what we've been using as a practice has been a practice, and part of that is to be able to maximize the time so that teachers can actually really dig into the meat that they're digging into. The teachers are working hard during that time, whether it's a district day or whether it's a school-based day where they're focusing on the kids in their building, or they're focusing on the curriculum.
I was wondering about the difference between when it's a school-based day. Presumably, there's like less needing to like get to another school to meet with other. Yeah, and I also think like making it more complicated rather than more regular is hard for parents, and probably hard for kids. But like it is a very short day. They're not at 12:30. It doesn't quite feel, even though it counts as a whole day. It doesn't feel.
There's a lot of learning. You can commit. There's a lot of learning going on in those classrooms during these 12:30 days. Those kids are learning. They're not running around being, I'm going to get out at 12:30. Things are going on in each of the buildings. On those days. And as we've advocated before, I think those early releases are important to be able to do the work that they do. They just don't have there's no time for teachers to do what they need to in terms of whether it's the classroom-based work or whether it's the district-based work that we're trying to do. Hence, if we go to a weekly early release, trying to find it so that there's support for parents afterwards. But it's really funny when I go to meetings and asked about whether or not we have early release to support the work, colleagues are surprised that we don't, and how our teachers are doing the work that they need to do when they don't have the time. So I think it's something we have to figure out.
Jared?
I was just looking at this, and then could you switch one of those early release days from November and put it on the 23rd?
Yeah.
Or the 22nd? That way it breaks, it's not 16 days, it's 13 days. And it's not a full week in November off, it's only 5. And you still get your early release days that you need for your district and school day.
Teachers may not be very happy about having professional development on the 23rd.
Or 22nd.
Oh, the 26th. Yeah.
Let's go for, is that Monday? Wait, are you saying like
Logistically take one of the half days from that week and
No, I get it, but then you're putting a half day, with 2 days off and a half day and then 13 days off.
No, the 2 December.
Can I suggest that they're probably taking our intel and the hard working calendar committee
Yeah.
to deal with the minutia.
Right.
And just, I mean.
I'm gonna call on myself and then Marie.
Okay.
And who else has their hand up? Did I miss anyone? But just to say, as Susan was alluding earlier, that and Eliza, the calendar and the calendar committee and Selena and Mike who are always with the calendar is always like as many competing opinions. Like for there's a lot of emphasis on complete weeks, but then there's different ideas about when holding early releases on Wednesdays because it would reduce absenteeism, but then that turns out to be very unpopular with many people who are there. So it's hard to find a solution. I mean, it seems like does seem to be unanimity about like having school on the 22nd of December, for example. But when it comes to many of these things, it's hard to find a solution that pleases, that meets all, that satisfies all needs and makes everyone happy. But anyway,
all right, so there's 2 things. One is, can we put, if you have never had a senior, you have one now. So, and Matt can back this up. So they don't have to go to classes 2 weeks before the end of graduation or the end of school. What's the rule? In Maine, you can not have your seniors go to school for the last 2 weeks of classes.
Right there.
Okay. Sorry to break it to you. I didn't know about that until the chalk talk like the week before. Maybe my senior didn't want to tell me. Anyway, she would go nuts. So what I'm getting at is, can we put that on the calendar? Because I think that a lot of people would really like to know that that's the last day of school for seniors. It's a weird Maine rule. Like one day I went and I looked up all the states and how many days we had to be in school, and Maine is actually really low compared to a lot of other states. You have to be in 175. Lots of other states, you got to be in school a lot more than that. And then I saw the little asterisk, like, in addition, seniors don't have to attend class for the last 2 weeks. You can make that decision at a district level to have seniors come to school for the last 2 weeks of class, or you can make the decision not to have them. So it looks like we've made the decision not to have them. I don't think that's going to change. If it is, I would love it. But anyway, can we put that on the calendar?
Outside of the graduation date?
Whatever, what is it calculated back from graduation date or what?
Right, it's in the calendar, basically.
But
The only thing
has
that
its
would-
own asterisk to see it?
We could put in this calendar an asterisk on like that Wednesday the 3rd that says last day for seniors, which it says on our internal calendar.
Right, but this is, I would love to know that as a senior parent, that the June 3rd is the last day my kid is going to be in class, even though, isn't it earlier than that? Last year it was
because
April.
this calendar has we start. It's because of the 2-week Christmas vacation and the fact that the first Sunday in June. It's the same conversation we're having about Labor Day.
Okay.
Start being Monday the 1st. The first Sunday in June is the latest it could possibly be in this calendar.
Okay, so I would advocate for every year, can we please tell parents that their kids don't, their seniors do not go to school after whatever date that is. That's one. Two, like I don't want to, I'm opening a can of worms, I'm just going to say it, like, just remember when the committee comes back next year with like, we're going to start school after Labor Day, we've been lucky that we haven't had 10 snow days this year, like we did last year. We had 7 days of school in December last year. 7. Because of storm and vacation. 7 days of school in December. So when we decide to go after Labor Day, we will be ending in mid-June, and then our snow days will happen after that, between 5 and 10 potential snow days. So we may be coming up with the idea that we will be in school at the end of July, at the end of June, which happened in my lifetime as a parent. It was the worst day of my life. Okay, right? Can you imagine going to school, your kids going to school? So I know all the calendar people know that, but I just want to keep reminding folks as we try to push things after Labor Day, there's a reason why it's before Labor Day. There's lots of reasons. And the third is, like, I think like one of the things, like, we always talk about this and we're like, obviously we're like the parent group and we're the school board group, and we're not like the teachers. And the things we say sometimes I would never want, and I know we're not, like to be misconstrued that somehow schools are babysitters or teachers are taking care of our kids. Like, we have a social contract. Like, education is a social contract with our community. And so that's why this is not about like we want our kids to be babysat by teachers. This is about this contract that it's like an unwritten contract of like how we as a community take care of our children, and that sometimes involves like how parents feel about how a calendar can impact their lives. And we know in many cases our kids are, like, you're joking, you're gonna be at home with me, but like we know in many cases like sometimes our kids are way better off like in a learning enriched environment where all their needs are fulfilled. And we know that as parents, we're not too proud to admit that. So I don't ever want us to come across, and I know we're not, but like for any teachers in the room that somehow we're like, we want you to babysit our kids, this is about a social contract that we as school board members are like supposed to be upholding and remembering and putting forth, and that's why we pay the taxes that we do, that's why we support the initiatives in the schools that we do, because we believe in the whole system and all the things that are connected to it and how we care for all of our community members. So just want to make sure we end on something like that rather than it looking like we're like, Friday, wherever. So I promise I'm done talking, but that's it.
So I think the calendar committee will, or Mike and Cindy and the calendar committee will take this feedback and return with another draft in the next meeting that everyone will love and be mostly unanimous and will meet all needs and desires, and we'll be happy.
I hear a lot about the early release. We have a grant that we're just looking at, John and I are starting to look at through the state to provide after school programming across all of our schools for next school year. And it's a really good opportunity, and I guess my big question to ask for those parents, I'm a parent, and my daughter is unlucky to have the YMCA. They're always there for early release, so I can do my job and I can send my daughter, and I feel very privileged for that. If that was an opportunity, would where we put the early release be so hard? Because I guess the big question is we're trying to do it to meet families, students, and staff. So we have staff in the building, not subs, even though we love them and we appreciate them. And we're trying to make sure students have as much consistency as possible. And that is, for us as educators, those full weeks, just like for you as board members. And as we start moving those early releases around, it messes up all the weeks. So if we had childcare opportunities in every town for our students, would it matter where we put those days as much as it does kind of currently in the conversation, where we're like, is it here, is it here? Or is it just we have to have childcare so there's no half days? Every child can have full day. Because that's what the committee really needs to know.
I think both. I think it does when we do need childcare, but also it does matter, I think consistency is probably, that's my personal feeling.
And that's like for the students, probably consistency, for the student experience.
Right.
Like I think for the parents.
So if we had like the first Friday of every month was an early release, would that be a better model than a model that's spreading it out across? Like it's the first Friday, then it's the third Friday, right? You just need that kind of consistency and then childcare. So it's
in a week too, if that first Friday has a Monday holiday, probably not. So,
I agree, yes.
I
Well, like the Thanksgiving, sorry.
I, just as a person who's hanging out with calendars and scheduling, knowing that kind of thing would be really helpful. Because oftentimes I'll be like,
oh no, tomorrow's early release, ah. But that's just me.
But I think,
One thing might be really helpful if we could find out the data on, absenteeism, early releases, because there seems to be a lot of conflicting ideas and opinions that partly have to do with whether it is, like, many parents, at least anecdotally, we've heard prefer an early release to be on a Friday, say, than in a midweek, but then there was concern about whether there was absenteeism, so it would just be nice to know what's actually the case on these, and then
Just wanted to quickly kind of piggyback on what Marie said in terms of like, we know it's not just childcare, so even if there, her referring to, oh, if there's childcare, no, if there's quality childcare.
programming.
Yes, that is well thought out and that kids are being safe and being watched, then that's something parents can consider. It just can't be childcare. It needs to be quality.
So this would be like educational based state funded partnerships, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, like an extension to their school day wouldn't be like an outdoor learning opportunity where maybe after school could partner with us. Kids would go on, obviously not nature, but like kayaking, like excursions, things like that. Things we have partnerships with, like Camp Beach Club and Rely. Like there's great programming out there and there's funding to support it. It's just figuring out like what is it. So I didn't mean to like reopen it, but like going back to the committee, we're back to like all over the place again. And I just want to make sure we can bring you something that meets the needs of like our kids, because that's what
My question about the scheduling question that you're asking, I'm wondering if it's intended to be offered as like is it incredibly widely offered to all? Is it like if you taken up the most? Or is it something that's sort of like the why to me as somebody who was in Fremont was very much like a totally supplemental thing that only some kids really have access to, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like if it's scheduled,
That'd be seamless.
So that a person's
kids, so that a person's kid can just go from school to there,
Yes.
doesn't require you to
Yes.
pay and sign up and
Totally.
whatever.
I think that
Right.
Well, like I'm at Trenton, and so like my first partnership, I would try to do this whole time, because they're right there. It's an amazing experience, it's a great opportunity. Does that mean every kid would participate? They might not sign up, but would it be a great offer? Yeah. Then you'd have to look at like each town, like, whether it's partnered with Beach Cliff or Neighborhood House or,
Parkways.
Yeah, there's lots of opportunities, but it's just like needing to know that before we write these grants is super helpful on what you're looking for.
Misha and
I think we did hear about Fridays being more convenient or whatever, and I think that still probably holds, but I also thought there was like some compelling discussion about like what was the whole point of this kind of hardship on the kids or whatever is to get quality planning time to serve the kids, right? Like that it would be good to hear if that's working on Fridays too, because I remember some good discussion about why Wednesdays or whatever we were looking at before, like in continuity, like, and I think that like that should be on the table again, because we shouldn't be doing this at all if we're not getting the thing that we, that the teachers really need in order to be able to serve the students.
Okay, we will return with more information next time.
Like the moon on our man. Faster.
There you go. Okay, there are no action items. Is there any other business? Future agenda items will include the calendar, our usual reports and updates, policy committee, policy should be back before us next time. Anything else? Okay, our next, is there any public comment? Okay, our next meeting is
Nancy?
Nancy?
Just a reminder to everybody that the AOS public budget meeting is next Wednesday, 22nd.
So, has everyone got that in their calendar? Public budget meeting, the 22nd, at 6 o'clock.
And we do need more than one person from every town, which we've had to call people and ask them to come, so please try and show up if
Maybe
you
we
can.
can send out a reminder or something to ourselves. Okay, in addition to the next public budget meeting, which is next Wednesday at 6 p.m., our next regular meeting is Monday, 10th of February, either at 5 or 6. So.
Probably will be at 5 because I have to be at Tremont Select Board meeting or wherever we're going.
Yeah.
The AOS will
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you all.